Hey, if you're a journalist who uses the tool Help a Reporter Out, or Harrow, listen up. Harrow is moving to Cision's new app, Connectively. But what is Connectively? Well, imagine a place where you can quickly connect with expert sources for your next story. Connectively is a new app from Cision that's changing the way journalists, like us, content creators, experts and PRs work together. So if you're in search of credible sources, Connectively is your next stop. With just a click, you can publish your queries. These go straight to a feed where experts from loads of different backgrounds can respond, giving you their expertise. So go on, visit connectively.us to sign up for free. That's connectively.us. Connectively.us.
Hello and welcome back to Series 14 of Freelancing for Journalists.
In this series, we are celebrating and learning more about our Freelance Journalism Awards winners.
Yes, we're chatting with all our winners to find out more about their fantastic work. And this week we've got a double hitter.
Yes, this week's guest won 2 categories. But before we get to that, we need to chat about our win of the week, as usual. What's yours this week, Lily?
Well, I am sat in my win of the week. I have finally moved into my new office. This has been my summer project. Previously, my office was a corner of the hall downstairs, and it's quite a big hall, so it was a decent size, but everyone was sort of coming past me all the time, which used to drive me nuts. So we've had a revamp in the house. I've moved into the spare room. I spent the summer painting, got the carpet sorted, and yeah, moved in. So I'm now here with my nice bookshelf behind me and my, as you can see, my running shoes. And yeah, I've got my own room with a door, and my kids have done a sign that says, there's one that says please knock, and then the other side says do not disturb. So I'm very happy I finally have my own office after many, many years.
Yeah, it's great. And I think the one thing that I found when I sorted my own kind of office space was it's really good to be able to shut the door on it and walk away. It's not part of the house. That was quite a useful thing.
Yeah, although I'm realizing now it's upstairs, it's a bit of a pain. Like if I'm like, oh, I quickly need to go and note something down, I've got to go all the way upstairs to do it. Whereas before I just nipped into the hall.
Getting your steps in, it's training.
Yeah, yeah. Like I need more steps. How about you then, Emma? What's yours?
Well, it's not as exciting as that. But I've been doing some tidying. I do like to start September with kind of a clear desk, a clear head, fresh, kind of a fresh start. And I had a massive, massive pile of just admin stuff, just like, just house admin bits of paper. It just really got out of hand over here, and I just had no time to sort it. So I did actually sit down, and it took me quite a few hours, completely filled the bin with recycling. But I've sorted it, so I do feel like I'm ready to attack the new school year as it was now. So yeah,
I love
sometimes
a good
you just
admin
need,
day.
yeah, definitely just take some time to just sort your life out. That's what I've been doing. I've just been sorting my life out. Okay, it's time to introduce our guest this week. So today we have with us Nicola Kelly, who won 2 of our awards categories. Our judges selected Nicola for Best News Story and the Best Feature, 2 of the most popular categories. This is really good work, Nicola. Nicola is a journalist and writer focused on UK immigration and asylum. Her work regularly appears in The Guardian, The Observer, Independent, Open Democracy, Byline Times, and more.
Yes. Congratulations on the double win, Nicola.
Oh, thank you. I was chuffed. It came as a surprise, but yeah, I was really chuffed. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it was excellent. And we've got lots of questions for you about both of those award-winning entries. But first of all, we're really interested about your route into journalism because it's a little bit different for some people, but I think it makes a lot of sense when you think about what you write about now. Am I right in thinking that you had a career as a diplomat first? And can you tell us a bit about how your career's panned out?
I did, yeah. God, it feels like a long time ago now, but yeah. So I went to uni. I won't say when I went because it will give my age away, but I did English and French at uni, which is a 4-year degree. So I had French already by the time I graduated, and then I moved to Italy after uni. I had an Italian boyfriend at the time. It's probably too much information, but yeah. And I started working for the embassy when I was there, like kind of events planning, like a bit of like freelance stuff, basically, like on the side of like doing some English teaching. And then I just kind of got to know people there. And when I was coming back to London, there was like an internship position at the Foreign Office press office, which was just so wildly different to like Rome and just like hanging out in cafes and bars and stuff. Um, so I got that internship really luckily. It was 6 months in the London press office. Really, really interesting. A bit of a like crash course in like world affairs. Like I'd never really been involved in like politics or like diplomacy or anything like that before. But yeah, it was super interesting. And then from there, I had an amazing boss who championed me and was really great. Hannah Coburn, who I'm still in touch with. And there was a position in Brussels, which I got. So I was there for 3 years, and then I went to Istanbul for a bit, all with the Foreign Office. And then in 2014, um, I had done like a number of back-to-back overseas jobs. So you have to come back when you're in the civil service, you have to come back after a certain number of overseas postings. So I came back and I could have gone back to the London press office for the Foreign Office, but a position came up at the Home Office, which sounded really exciting. And I was like, great, that sounds like sort of international facing still. It'd be nice to be in a different department, just see how that goes. So I moved there and I was there not that long. I hated it. I hated it immediately, actually. And the night before I started there, I said to my mum, I've got a sinking feeling I've made the wrong decision. And it was the right instinct because it was a terrible place to work. I mean, at the time, it was particularly awful because it was like the hostile environment was, I don't know if people will remember that, but basically it was like a series of policies, which are kind of still bearing out really, but basically like cracking down on people, new arrivals basically. And yeah, it was just like story after story and scandal after scandal. And it was just, yeah, it was like firefighting and the people were just, it was really cutthroat. And I felt really intimidated in a way I'd never done in the Foreign Office or any other jobs I'd ever done. Um, so yeah, so I left the civil service and I moved into journalism from there. So yeah, it's quite a sort of weird, circuitous, like unconventional route into journalism. But yeah, I sort of found myself reporting on UK immigration and asylum based on that background at the Home Office, and partly the Foreign Office as well.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense when you kind of then learn about the type of reporting that you do and the story that you entered for the news award. This one was sponsored by Birmingham City University, and it's a tough category, this one. And it was a piece on uncovering how the Home Office had provided more than £3 million in funding to Turkish border forces in the last year to prevent migrants reaching the UK. I understand there was quite a lengthy backstory to this piece coming about. So can you sort of tell us how it came to fruition?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, so I sort of specialize now in UK immigration asylum, so focus on UK. And a journalist who's based in Turkey, Hannah Lucinda Smith, she got in touch with me. She'd had a tip off from somebody in Turkey about lots of funding going to the Home Office and to the Foreign Office in Turkey. And she got in touch with me because she was like, I can get sources here in Turkey, but I haven't got so many sources in the UK. Do you think you can find people within the Home Office? And so yeah, so I just sort of went about finding sources in the Home Office, while she focused on, she went to the east of Turkey, and interviewed some refugees there. And originally we were going to do it for Channel 4, and then it just didn't work out. It all got kind of dropped at the last minute because they felt that they didn't have enough. So then Hannah and I agreed that we'd do one piece for the Times, who she tends to report for, which would focus on Turkey, and I would do a piece for The Guardian, who I tend to report for, on the UK side of things. I'd had quite a lot of contact with various different people within the particular unit that we needed to focus on. So yeah, that's the piece that won, that got into The Guardian.
And the thing, sorry, that I was just going to pick up on that, because the thing that the judges really picked up on was those kind of key sources that you had. You know, the fact that you were able to kind of speak to people and have a lot of authority in that piece, from, you know, from your previous sort of career. So I mean, in for that story, but sort of more broadly in your reporting, like how do you gain the trust of those contacts, and is a lot of it through the networks, you know, of people you previously worked for? And also kind of legally, what kind of checks do you have to go through as well?
Yeah, it's really tough with the Home Office. I've kind of, in a way, chosen the most difficult department to focus on because it's notoriously really defensive, and like nobody will talk. And they have a policy of, it's slightly changing now under Labour, but it's under the Tories, it was a nightmare. Where basically any inquiry that goes to anybody within the Home Office will just get rerouted to the Press Office. So yeah, that can be quite tricky. Partly it's down to people I used to know, but not so much for this story. It was a bit more like I tried to get in touch with people on LinkedIn, and then I just got rerouted to the Press Office. But the head of this unit that I was focusing on was like, yeah, I'm up for talking. You know, you need to go through the Press Office, but I can do a background briefing. I was like, amazing. You know, this is like the head of the unit. This is the guy I need to be speaking to. And he said, you know, we need people to know a bit more about the groundbreaking work my team's doing. And I was like, this is, you know, amazing. No one in the Home Office ever is up for talking, especially at a senior level. And then the Press Office cracked down on it and were like, no way. So I had to go through other sources who knew people or had been in meetings with that unit. So I couldn't get directly into the unit. And from them, so it's like for people who used to work with the unit or people who still work with the unit or have been involved in meetings. So kind of like a circuitous route into that unit. So it's quite a small unit. And then, yeah, and then I got in touch with people who work there. But yeah, it was like strictly off records. Like, yeah, have to be super careful about not identifying anybody. I think particularly when there's really few people working for a team, like it was like a couple of dozen people, it's really easy for internally for people to figure out who's spoken to a journalist. So yeah, I had to be really careful about it. But yeah, it kind of started with LinkedIn. Then I went through other contacts I already had and sort of worked my way in from outside it, basically. And legally, there was, yeah, I mean, I went through the Press Office for a right to reply. So from their side, that was kind of covered off. And then the Guardian lawyer looked over it all, and then my editor was across the piece the whole way I was working on it. But it wasn't that legally contentious. Like I've definitely worked on pieces that I've had way more pushback on other pieces I've worked on. But as always with all Home Office stories, there was a need to be sort of careful on the legal side.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It shows that you just need persistence, and just if you keep pushing, you will find that one person who will have more confidence or be happy to talk to you. I mean, I've had this with NHS England just absolutely constantly. It drives me up the wall. And like you said, it's interesting because when the new government came in, so Wes Streeton, who's the health secretary, specifically told a room full of health journalists that it would change, he would make it easier. Because I've had scenarios where it might be a national clinical advisor for a certain area has said to me immediately, I'm really happy to talk about this. We need to talk about the work that we're doing on this. And this, but you have to go through the press office. Immediate shutdown. And
So
it's just so frustrating. So frustrating.
It's
So I'm
every
glad
time
it's
you
not
hear
just
it, it's
helpful.
like, oh God, you know, that story's going to get shut down, or I'm not going to get, the piece isn't going to get out there now because it's been rerouted to press office. But yeah, it is annoying.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good to hear that it's not just government press offices, that it's also like big institutions, you know, big other public services like the NHS.
Yeah. I had one with an NHS hospital as well this week. I'd already done the interview, pretending I hadn't, just so she was covered. And then like a week later, oh yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I know it's fine. I've already done the interview, but yeah, it's mad. So yeah, let's get on to your feature, which this one was sponsored by the NUJ Freelance branch. And this piece was all about what it's like to work as a delivery rider for food apps such as Deliveroo and Uber Eats. And this is an interesting one because I remember reading this when it came out. I was absolutely fascinated by this piece. And every so often we'll get awards entries because there's so much and such a diverse kind of range of articles. You will come across one like, oh, I read that one. That was everywhere. So for this one, you shadowed a delivery rider. So I was immediately interested when I read it about like just how you organize that, how it, like the logistics of getting that set up and how it worked. So can you talk us through how that came about?
Yeah, I wanted to do it for ages. I had it in my mind. I love shadowing pieces. I think they're my favorite pieces to do, like a sort of like an insight into someone else's world. I've done quite a few of them, and they're always really interesting and really fun and insightful. So part of the kind of UK immigration piece, I guess, is like migrant workers. And so many people who are undocumented work in the food delivery industrial, not really an industry because it's totally unregulated, but like in that field. And so I kind of had in my mind that I really wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it as a shadowing piece rather than, there's been so much about Deliveroo and like legal ramifications and stuff, but I wanted to do it like inside what it's actually like basically to be a delivery rider. So it took a while. It took quite a long time actually. And I think probably the way it ended up happening was there was a vigil for a guy who really sadly died, a delivery rider, Brazilian guy. And his friends had organised, there was a hit and run, and his family had come over, and his friends had organised this vigil for him. And I was in touch with a guy who works for a trade union who was really helpful, Alex Marshall, who's great for the IWGB. And he said, we're organising this vigil. I've been in touch with him already. And he said, we're organising this vigil. It might be a good place for you to meet riders because loads of the riders are going there. So I went along to that, scrabbling around for childcare. I was like, I really want to go to this thing because I think it would be a good, a good way to meet people and sort of begin to understand what it's like for them. Because it involves a lot of trust, you're having someone, a journalist, following you around for 12 hours, and sort of write about quite personal information about your life as well. So, yes, I went along to that vigil, and I met quite a few riders when I was there, mainly Brazilians, Bangladeshis, and they talked to me about what it's like to be a rider, but also their like accommodation, how precarious their accommodation is, like what they do, when they're not working, how competitive it is. Loads of different things about like workers' rights and stuff. And coincidentally at the time, like within about a week or two of going along to that vigil, an editor I'd worked with a fair bit when she used to be at the news desk for The Guardian was like, I'm setting up this new series, it's on workers' rights. Have you got any ideas? And I was like, oh, actually, I could re-angle that piece. So it's not just a news piece, like a harder news piece. I could write it as a kind of like covering a shift as a delivery rider and all of the workers' rights issues that go into it, and kind of like, focus slightly differently to how I usually focus my pieces. So so I did that. And then then I just went along, and my bike totally broke on the train on the way there. And we had to begin by going to, like, none of this made it to the piece, obviously, but we had to like begin by going to like an Evans Bikes and getting my bike fixed. And then I was trying to go around on like a Lime bike. The Lime bike kept malfunctioning, and it was just a bit of like, oh God. But Shafi, who I shadow, was super cool about it all and was like, yeah, he knows like every bike store, every street, every like shortcut and stuff. And it was really fascinating. I found myself getting quite like, not angry, but just a bit like, you see the injustices like against people like quite clearly when you're doing a shadowing piece. And there was, it was just a kind of like sharp contrast between these like investment bankers coming out like interns, like American interns, and all these like car dealerships and stuff all around. And then these guys that are getting like £2. And it's like you've basically been working for like 20 minutes, waiting, taking it there, getting back to your like spot where you're going to be picking up your next order and stuff. And you get £2 for it. And these guys are just ordering these like £80 sushi meals to their desk and stuff, and the company's paying for it all. And it was just this like really sharp contrast between like you didn't even tip him, like, and you didn't have to pay for that meal. I don't know. I couldn't have said anything because I was just observing and standing back. But I found that piece a bit like I was totally fascinated by it, but I was also like, God, you really see the sharp contrast between these two like incredibly different worlds. But I love doing it.
Yeah. And I wanted to pick your brains about it actually, because I'm doing something sort of along similar lines that involves running. And I wanted to know, like, how did you record like what you were observing? If you're on the go all day and trying to talk to people and make a note of observations, first of all, like, how did you record that? And then when it came to writing up, like, how did you decide sort of what to include and how much color to have in the piece?
Yeah, it's a good question because I struggle to figure out how to record it. So I had my dictaphone. I was recording on my phone, but it was like over 12 hours, and I knew that I was only going to be using like a select number of quotes or moments. Every time we stopped, so we'd be riding along, and I'd be kind of observing things as we were riding along. But every time we stopped, I had my notebook out and I'd record. So I kind of did it like that. So like we wouldn't be talking as we were cycling along, usually because the roads were so busy. So we'd stop and then I'd make notes and record then. But yeah, it was a lot of recording. How did I decide what bits to use? I think there was quite a few bits that he was great because he really good with sound bites, like unintentionally. Like he wasn't kind of like, I often find when interviewing Americans, for example, they're just so good at sound bites, and you're just like, yes, I'll use that bit. I'll use that bit. And he was also really good, just like really naturally said things like, it's like the wild, wild west out here. Everything's totally unregulated and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that's a really good headline. It didn't make it into the piece in the end, but yeah. So there were certain bits that as I was listening to him talking and making notes, I was like, oh, I'll definitely use that bit. Or that's a really good quote. Or that illustrates that point really well. And then I guess the other thing outside of his quotes was just observations about of my own, like, just about, like those things I was talking about a minute ago about investment bankers coming out and stuff, and like a Saudi guy that got, because I could see the receipt and I could see how much people were spending on these things, and I was like, oh, do you mind if I just look at your receipt and see how what people have ordered? And so I kind of like, it was partly my own observations. And I spoke to like security guards on doors and stuff as well. That didn't make it into the piece, but that kind of informs the observations, I guess. But yeah, quotes, it was as I was listening to him speaking, I was just like, oh, that's really good. I'll use that bit.
Did you use your dictaphone at all then in the end, or was it just the notebook?
Not really. I used my recorder on my phone because I had my phone out the whole time in case I needed to like track where he was, because we had the like find my phone, or whatever it's called, like thing on in case I lost him in traffic. So I had my phone like in my pocket, like with me all the time. So I just recorded on my phone. Yeah, I'm kind of, yeah, I often use both. Like if I'm interviewing someone in like a cafe or something, I'll have both, like, yeah, and then my notebook as well. But yeah, I didn't then. I just had my phone and my notebook.
So I can really tell, obviously, from how you were explaining that kind of writing about injustice, kind of shining a light on injustice is something that you really care about. That's like the sense, like all your reporting comes back to this, basically. And there have been impacts of this, like your reporting's been used in legal challenges. You gave evidence to the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Select Committee on Afghan resettlement schemes. But I guess it takes ages for any change to happen, etc. Do you sometimes get frustrated, I suppose, even though you're having these kind of measurable outcomes of your reporting? Do you sometimes get frustrated that you want it to have a bigger impact, or you want it to, like, you want change to happen more quickly?
Yeah, I guess there's kind of an acceptance that, like, particularly on this brief, it's really unlikely that change is going to happen. I think a legal challenge or like a submission or oral statement in the Commons or something is like the best you can really hope for on something like this. Yeah, I mean, it is very slow and sort of incremental, but like, and it is nice to hear like, oh wow, they've even like aware that that piece has gone out, or like aware that that sort of is happening. So yeah, I mean, it is heartening, I guess, to hear that it's been used in some way or even been read. But yeah, at the same time, loads of people leave this covering this topic because it's just the change is so slow. Um, like journalists, but also activists and like grassroots organizations close and stuff. Partly because they don't see change happening quickly enough. And it's sort of like you just work so hard all the time on this, like especially the grassroots organizations. And it just changes so fast. And there's always something. Like I've just been away on holiday and I was like, took a break from like just following it really closely day in, day out. And I was like, oh my God, I've got so much to catch up on. I'm writing a book at the moment. I'm just trying, like in the final stages of it. And I was like, I've got so much now to incorporate into, because of the far right riots and stuff. I've got so much to now incorporate. So it's just change every day. It feels like there's something else is going on. So I suppose the impact you can have as a reporter is like, it's an acceptance that it's like fairly limited. Like you're never going to completely overhaul the entire system with one piece or whatever. But over time, hopefully, even just raising awareness among like decision makers like ministers and others might help. But yeah, injustice is definitely it's a tricky area to cover, because it's like how do you bring about change as a journalist? You know, you just, the best you can hope for is like raising awareness and getting people to to know a little bit more about what it's actually like for real people on the ground. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's slow.
Even if it's just, tipping their Deliveroo driver,
Yes, yeah,
that can make a big difference to someone's life, can't it? If everybody starts doing it.
yeah.
So
Although there was
yeah.
so much pushback on that. Loads of people were like, you shouldn't be encouraging the tipping culture. We're not America, etc.
Yeah, I guess it's plastering over the problem.
Mm.
Yeah, it's tricky. But I mean, obviously your stories have, been have made people sit up and like you say, people in authority have taken notice. Wasn't it in October 23 that you gave evidence to the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Select Committee? I believe that was on how the government failed Afghan resettlement schemes. I mean, that's obviously something different again. So how did you prepare for that? And what was it like kind of being questioned in that way?
Yeah, really different to my day-to-day work. Yeah, really weirdly, I was writing about this the other day. I used to go in there like I did a really brief stint in the number 10 press office when I was at the Foreign Office. And I used to go in there every day. And it was really weird walking in there as a journalist rather than like a civil servant, because I was like, it's going to be me in the spotlight. I've seen people doing this so many times, and it's going to be me sitting in that chair. I was so nervous. I've never been so nervous about anything in my life, like hands down. I'm not sure I'd be able to do it again. I was that nervous. It was awful. But it all went okay. Once I was in there, but it's like going out on stage. And I just thought, people do this, like these MPs sitting around the table, they do this, like for them, this is like just a normal meeting. You know, it's not a big deal in the slightest, but for me, it was like a huge thing. Um, I spoke to loads of people in Afghanistan about their experiences. I spoke to people in Pakistan, and I spoke to people who have actually made it to the UK. I'd done a fair bit of reporting on Afghanistan and the resettlement schemes already, so it was kind of like picking up with those contacts again and being like, where are you now? Like, what's the outcome been for you? And I read figures, I just read reports and like made sure I had the figures kind of clear in my head, although they didn't come out that clearly when I was actually in there. But yeah, made sure I had it all noted down. I had all the figures there. And that was it really. I just kind of thought through and tried to anticipate the questions that might come up, because I had no idea what might come up. And actually the questions that came up were completely different to anything I thought. Like, I think I got one question where it was like, oh, I kind of anticipated that might come up. Everything else was completely out of the blue. I think they asked at the very beginning, can you describe what the situation's like in Afghanistan at the moment on the ground? And I was like, I've never been to Afghanistan. You know, I don't know. I write about the UK side of things, you know. So I was like, oh God, you know, so I was sort of stumped from the very, very beginning. But they are sort of they're not trying to catch you out. They're trying to get information out of you. But I don't know, it was different. It was worse than a job interview, because there's 12 of them. And yeah, but hopefully in the end, like what they said at the end was they hadn't linked the two. The one thing I really wanted to do in that hearing was link the small boat crossings to the failure of the schemes. Because I was like, you know, the fact that we don't resettle people, the fact that these schemes have completely failed, basically, has now resulted in people, more Afghans than any other nationality in the world, crossing by small boat. So, you know, I wanted to make that link really clear. And in the end, they immediately after that hearing, they had the Foreign Office minister in, Lord Ahmed, and they said, we've never heard this link made before. What have you got to say to it? And I was like, wow, you know, they've actually like listened. They've actually listened, and like that link has been made clear enough that they've questioned the minister on it. So that was good to hear. But yeah, it was only 45 minutes, but it felt like, yeah, the days leading up to it felt like an eternity.
Yeah, I mean, well done for getting your point across. I think not that I've done anything like that, but it, like, you can just imagine kind of going through it at the end and thinking, I've no idea what I just said, what happened. It's all just, and then you could kind of watch it back and go, oh, actually, I made complete sense. But in the moment, it's just kind of
Sort of, yeah. Out of body. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I think, talking to you, it's kind of really obvious to me that you think journalistically, that you know what makes a good story. You know, you've got so many good bylines and headlines to your name, but I'm interested, we can't let you go without learning a little bit more about how you made that switch from not journalist to journalist, because there'll be other newbie freelancers listening to this who want to know more. So did you do any training? Was it a steep learning curve? How did you get those first commissions? What was that like? What did that little jump look like initially?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't immediate by any means. So I left the civil service and was like, I'd worked in press offices and worked in communications jobs. So I'd worked with journalists for like years, like 6 years, I think. So I had an understanding of like how journalists worked and like how they met deadlines and how a newsroom worked and stuff. And I was like, I really want to do it myself. I really want to see if I can do it. And I really wanted to do broadcast first, which in retrospect, I'm like, just have no intention of doing broadcast now, because I like, based on that Commons Select Committee thing, I'm like, I could not do this day in, day out. I don't know how people do it, but I really wanted to do radio. TV always scared me a bit more, but radio always felt a bit safer. And podcasting was sort of like gaining, momentum when I left the civil service. So I really wanted to do a bit more of that. But my kind of like segue into it was I did some communications consultancy work, like a totally freelance for NGOs, which was amazing. And often when I speak to like students now, I think it's the one of the best things I ended up doing, and I completely fell into it. It wasn't like a conscious decision. In fact, not very many things have been conscious decisions in my career, but I just was really interested in like traveling. Basically, I really wanted to travel and see places I hadn't gone to before. So I worked for different NGOs in the comms team, like as a comms consultant. And I went out and got case studies, and like, then I learned all the skills that you learn through interviewing case studies. So there was a really great guy who was an editor on like a video team, one NGO I worked for. And he was like, here's a recorder. They had recorders there at the organization. Here's a recorder, like a Zoom, that's what they're called, Zoom H4n it was, recorder, and here's a mic, and here's the lead, and you need some headphones, like probably these, like 30 quid ones or whatever. It's really inexpensive, particularly in comparison to TV. When you're out on your trips getting these case studies, why don't you record them? And then you can sort of teach yourself by doing these things, like how to record, how to get decent quality audio, what sort of questions you want to ask to elicit the answers that you want to get. And I started doing that. And then basically we started to make them into like radio packages. So I kind of analysed like BBC World Service in particular, like World Service radio packages, like 4 minutes long, all the different elements that went into it. So you need a case study, you need maybe a medical expert, you might need a government minister, you might need I don't know, like, yeah, any number of people, like various experts, but also case studies. And I kind of figured out the different elements that you might need for a story and how to put those together into a story. And then we started selling them to the World Service, kind of like, yeah. And then some of them, I remember that my first one was from Ethiopia, that sound quality was appalling, absolutely awful. And they were like, could you come in and with the raw audio, because it's so bad, like what you've edited. And I don't know if that one even made it onto air, but I think I did a written piece. And then slowly but surely, but the sound quality got a bit better, as in I actually put the mic up to someone's mouth, and then my own. And then I got a second mic and knew to use both. And yeah, I kind of like taught myself the skills I would need for radio, like while I was still doing like NGO comm stuff, which was really great. And I traveled so much. It was amazing. I still think of it often when I'm like working from home and stuff. So yeah, that was a really great way of doing it, and like unintentionally, but it was a really, really great experience, and really great to travel and obviously have all your costs covered and everything, because you're, because you're working for a charity. So yeah, that was basically it. And then I kind of worked in through doing radio packages. Then I did longer form radio, like documentaries. And then I had my son, and I was like, I can't be, I didn't want to be traveling all the time. I wanted to focus a bit more on the UK, because being away for a couple of days is okay when you've got a young child, but not so much weeks as I had been. So yeah, so I kind of like shifted my focus to UK immigration and asylum and away from the more international stuff, and started writing a bit more than doing radio.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you've made that shift kind of from comms and PR into journalism? Because normally it's the other way around.
Yes, yeah.
And so I guess what would your advice be for someone else who's kind of making a change from one career to another? Like, how do you like switch your brain into like a different sort of mentality?
I guess it's kind of like figuring out what stories you want to tell and like how you want to tell them. It is tough. I mean, journalism's not an easy industry to move into, I would say. But yeah, I mean, I think that like NGO route is, I remember John, like around that time, hearing Jon Snow giving an interview, and he was like, my advice for anybody that wants to move into journalism is go and work in an NGO press office, because you will travel, you will figure out how to speak to lots of different people, and you will figure out how to put a story together. And I was like, that's kind of like, yeah. And maybe that was what kind of like encouraged me to do that. So yeah, that's one way of doing it. But as always, especially with freelancing, the question is money. I mean, like, because the schemes in like these newsrooms, and newsrooms are shutting down like left, right, and centre, and like Open Democracy of like all of the kind of they're paring back resources so much. And internships are few and far between. So I think freelancing is amazing. Like I love freelancing in the flexibility that it gives me in other aspects of my life, but also it means that I can follow one particular brief now, which wouldn't be possible if I was a staff reporter. I'd be in the newsroom, I'd be asked to do other things. I wouldn't necessarily be able to like follow my nose on a story, or like do that Deliveroo piece, for example, which took ages to set up. So yeah, I think then the NGO route is a good way of doing it, or just freelancing and just like trying to figure out what stories you want to tell. If you've got a particular like niche or area of like specialism that you want to follow, maybe you've got background in something that might help. Yeah, and then just sort of giving it a go, basically. I remember hearing Judi Dench saying years ago, like, in acting school, they always say, they talk about theory and they talk about this and that, and you got to learn all these skills before you actually go out and do it. And she was like, if you want to be an actor, act, just go out and do it. And I thought exactly the same thing about writing or journalism. Just if you want to do it, just do it, give it a go. Maybe give yourself a time limit, particularly where freelancing is concerned. Like in financial terms, it's not very lucrative, not always lucrative. And then yeah, just maybe set yourself some goals, some targets, and a time limit, and see how you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the one thing that I always try to get over to kind of younger journalists who ask, or people that I'm mentoring, is we don't arrive fully formed. If I look at the journalist that I was in my 20s, like I had so much to learn about it. I'm so different now in the way I approach things, the confidence that I've got, the different skills that I've, like, sometimes it's just patience. Just throw yourself into something, try it, know that it might not be perfect, and just have a go at it, but also be learning from the things that go wrong, I think, along the way. It's been so fascinating talking to you, Nicola. I think we could probably chat to you all day. But
well, ditto. But thanks.
Yeah, we all have childcare and things, and other things to do. So to round up, we're asking all our awards winners the same question. So that's, what would be your bucket list freelance opportunity? So, I mean, you've done a lot already. You're writing a book, but maybe it's a dream publication that you haven't written for yet, or a particular story that you want to cover, or a person you'd like to interview. So what's kind of the top of that freelance bucket list for you?
Yeah, the book was the big thing. I think I've never written for an American publication, and I'd be really interested in learning how different it is to working for a UK publication. They also pay like at least double what the UK publications pay. But I'd love to write more long form. Like, writing the book has been the best thing I've ever done professionally, including in the civil service. Like, I have absolutely loved it, because it's just so liberating writing and the way that you want to write. And the editing is so light. Like, I'm at the very final stages with it now, and it's just been so great to write how I write and like in my own style. So I'd love to do more long form pieces off maybe unrelated to UK immigration and asylum, like on a completely different topic. I don't particularly want to, I was thinking about this on holiday, I don't particularly want to focus on like politics, forever. So yeah, maybe moving on to a slightly different topic, writing long form for like the New Yorker would be the dream. It would be amazing. The New York Times have an amazing investigative unit as well. That'd be cool. But yeah, it would just be good to figure out how different publications, like US publications, work. And yeah, like the kind of formulas seem quite different. So sometimes I think with like, particularly when writing news pieces, they can be quite formulaic in terms of like the first few paras have to include this, and then you have a quote, and then you have this, and it's all kind of like you figure out roughly the structure of your pieces, and they more or less follow the same form. But yeah, it'd be good to just figure out how US publications differ, and yeah, and how they operate. I imagine it's way more cutthroat, but that's like
And I
maybe just
think
a perception.
they have a lot more editing and fact checking, and
Oh yes, fact checking, yeah.
A lot more people involved. I remember picking up it was quite a long time ago, picking up a newspaper when I was over in America. I think it was in San Francisco, and I was reading it and I was going, when are they going to get to the point?
Yeah.
It was like these really long drop intros on like the front page splash. And it was just a completely different style of writing.
Yeah.
So I think you're right, kind of getting your head around like the way that they structure their pieces is really fascinating. But I mean, that's the great thing, isn't it, about being freelance? You can always kind of move on to something else and set yourself a new challenge.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really good one to put on your list maybe for next year.
After maternity leave, yeah.
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 Oh, well, it's been so great to chat to you. We're gonna have to wrap up now, but thank you so much, Nicola, for coming on to speak to us, and congratulations again on your well-deserved double win.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great to chat to you both.
You can find all our resources at freelancingforjournalists.com, and if you haven't already, come and find our Freelancing for Journalists group on Facebook. There's loads of people in there. You got any questions about freelancing, that's the place you need to be.
Yes, and just a final note to say thanks to our producer Maddie Drury, and a huge thank you to all of our Freelance Journalism Awards sponsors. So they were not only Birmingham City University, but also the NUJ Freelance Branch, Women in Journalism, Savanta, X-Tiles, News Associates and Paydesk. And we're going to be back again next week with another award winner. But goodbye for now.
Bye.